Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by the Young Scientists Committee of the VPH, the Society for In Silico Medicine. And today we are going to discuss how to integrate in silico and experimental approaches in biomedical research with leading experts that were available to talk to our community. So let's start with our first guest of today, Dr. Shiny Martis. Shiny is a senior regulatory scientist at Sanofi, and her work focuses on pharmacological modeling as well as virtual population and disease model development. And she's also chair of the Young Scientists Committee of the VPH community, and therefore she is actively promoting the collaboration within the in silico medicine field. And for you, the first question of today is, how did you become involved in silico modeling, and how does your current work combine that with the experimental testing?
Thank you, Luca. Thank you. I would like to stand corrected that I am a QSP modeler at Sanofi. I'm sorry, this is recent. I should have updated you. I used to be a reg scientist. And just a disclaimer that my opinions are my own and do not represent that of my employer. Said that, let's get to your question. In silico modeling, interestingly, I found out about this during my engineering course. We had a modeling course, and that's when I found out it was interesting. And we developed a model to simulate a fermenter during the time. And I pursued a master's in bioinformatics, and I liked the idea of having experiments done and then having predictions made during through modeling and then having the back and forth between the two. And then I pursued a PhD. Interestingly, I found a job as a QSP modeler right after, where I got the opportunity to develop and look at the models with respect to pharmaceutical drug development approach. And that continuing the same streak, currently my job profile involves in developing disease models and having quite some insightful predictions into the development cycle, and also combining, it could be bench, preclinical, clinical data into this model to make it more credible and make the results more valid.
Thank you, Shiny. Thanks a lot for introducing yourself, and of course you will be our industry guest and point of view for the rest of this webinar. Let's introduce our second guest, Professor Simona Celi. She's director of the Bioengineering Fondazione Monasterio in Italy, founder and head of the Biocardio Lab, and her work focuses on translating and integrating engineering sciences into clinical practice with a bench-to-bedside and back approach. Our first question for you, Simona, is how did your work evolve to integrate these different approaches in the cardiovascular research that you are conducting?
Thank you, Luca, and good evening to everyone. Well, this is with this question, I can answer by shortly describing my life from my thesis up to now, because I trained as a mechanical engineer in a department of classical mechanics, art mechanics, but since my thesis, my interest moves to the soft biological tissue for the cardiovascular system. And to put this in context, it was right around the time Professor Zapfel promoted his strain energy function for cardiovascular for arteries. So it was the first insight to combine experiment and modeling. So it was during my PhD that I took my first step into the experimental method. And to be honest, my previous initial setup were very rudimentary, but they fundamental for my career because they support me to understand how to build also a setup, how to perform an experimental test, and then how to combine the experimental results into numerical modeling. And during my postdoc, I moved from the university to a cardiovascular center, Fondazione Toscana Gabriele Monasterio. And here I start again to build up a numerical environment and experimental bench test, with the idea to combine numerical and experimental, but also clinical data. And this was the first challenge, because the idea was to start from the patient data, analyze this type of data, perform modeling, make additional investigation, both with solid and fluid dynamics approach to understand better the cardiovascular physiopathology of our patient, the patient that we are studying, but with the focus of a translational research to come back to the patient. So this is basically the last 2 decades of my life, and what is now my laboratory.
Thank you very much, Simona, for this brief summary of your nice work in your lab. Let's go further with our last, but not least, guest of today, Professor Stéphane Avril. Stéphane is a professor of biomechanics at MIN Saint-Étienne and director of the Biose laboratory. His work lies to improve the management of cardiovascular diseases through numerical modeling. So I think this is a perfect guest for our discussion. And our first question for Stéphane is, what led you to focus on computational biomechanics, and how do you gain the trust of clinicians with the digital twins that you developed in your work?
So thanks for this introduction. And my background is very similar to Simona's, and I was a mechanical engineer. I did my PhD in civil engineering, and well, in life there are like opportunities that sometimes they occur only once, and so there was this position they created in École des Mines Saint-Étienne like 20 years ago. They wanted to develop biomechanics, and so when I got the position, there was a super strong demand from cardiovascular surgeons to work with biomechanicists. So they were really expecting that a biomechanicist would come to this city, and they had a lot of ideas. They were super open-minded, and so they had questions related to tissue characterization, to stent graft deployment. So they were really using the latest technologies for treating aortic aneurysms. And so for me, it was just using my skills in mechanics to answer their questions, and they were providing clinical data, and we got, super good students. So that's all this that led me to this focus that was not really, a decision that I took, but more like opportunities and a very good connection with the clinical people back in the time. And I think that's also what led to trust from them first, because then we were really working as a team, and then we didn't know that we were developing digital twins back in the time, but then started to take the shape of that. But I think that the trust increased when we decided to found a startup company, and that we started to have more an entrepreneurial way of translating our research to the clinics, and then a number of other surgeons started to gain trust in that, because also then there were funding to I mean, build clinical studies and to gather cohorts of patients to validate the benefits of using these digital twins. So, which is, I mean, for predicting the deployment of stem grafts during EVAR treatment. So, well, that's, I think, well, a short summary to answer this question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stéphane. And I think the credibility from the company side and the translational aspect in the clinical one are being already underlined by our guests. I will now leave the word to Elena, that will moderate the next round of questions.
Thank you, Luca. So let's move on to this first round titled Integration of Modeling and Experiments. I will address one question for each panelist. So starting from Shiny, I would like to ask you, how can in silico modeling and experimental work be integrating from the very start of a research project instead of being used one after the other?
I was muted. Thank you for the question, Elena. I think there is a two point of view with respect to this question. When it comes to industry, I think all the fancy words that come along, right? Collaboration and multi-team joining together to do a task, and all such terms comes along. At the same time, I also see that in academic laboratories, there is also people are talking, students are talking, and they tend to discuss their problems where they do find solution within each other. All said, I believe the solution is to consciously start considering the possibility of integrating modeling right from the beginning. That is, when you are creating a project, may that be at the stage of proposal writing or formalization of project, to see if there is some methodology that can be used to, let's say, optimize the whole course of research work. It could be designing experiments to feed into the model, or vice versa, where you say design the model to get predictions so that you can set up your experiments better. These approaches, I believe most of the labs have been considering these days, at least in the industry. Some projects at the beginning do have this requirements that so and so experts need to take a look at it, so that if there is any point of view that could be considered to have both the modeling and experimental work to go along the same line, you must consider it. It could be for, saving resources or cutting down timelines. There could be the industry requirement, but also at laboratories to have quicker results and more credible results. I believe we can leverage the model results and the experimentation results to do this feedback mechanism into each other, so that you develop a project in such a way that your success rate is much higher right from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Shiny. I love your idea of the feedback between the experimental and the modeling approaches. And since you mentioned the connections with academia, I would like to hear also the perspective from the two panelists from academia. So starting from Simona, I would like to ask you what makes the collaboration between modelers and experimentalists successful in translational or clinical research?
Hi, Helena. We are used to viewing the modeler and the experimentalist as a separate entities, and adversary also in a sort of way. sometimes. But I think that it's essential to cultivate a shared foundation. What I mean is not in terms of academic background, but in terms of a deep experience and perspectives. What I mean is that it should be clear that both of these two words contribute to the translational research, and we should strive to move forward in parallel. There is a beautiful sentence, a quote by Galileo Galilei that is a sort of my leitmotiv. And this quote say that measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not so. This means that we have for every problem two type of lens that we can use to consider the problem. The real growth of the research in terms of translational research, in my view, is to provide in parallel this type of approach, because both analyze the same problem with same with different tools, so with different let me say accuracy, with different hypotheses to simplify and to make the problem realizable. And to balance this apparent dichotomy between who is the master and who is the slave, between computation and experiment results, well, in my lab, thanks to my fantastic and super collaborator, we try to analyze the same problem from both point of view. So the same aspect, starting from the clinical need, is analyzed with experiment and with computational, because this supports us in a cross-validation and also to provide information when one of the two words is not able to provide. So I don't know if this is the correct answer, but is what we try to do in our translational research.
Thank you, Simona. And a very fun fact. This morning I was in another webinar, and the panelist mentioned the same sentence of Galileo Galilei you just said to us, and this is the proof that the integration is in every field of the research. So thank you. The question for Stéphane is what are the key factors that enable effective integration of numerical models and experimental data in cardiovascular research?
Well, thanks, Elena, for this question. So I think there are several answers, but it's true that, well, what Simona said about having collaborators that can gather the skills of being excellent modelers and at the same time having excellent experimentalists is very rare in our domain, and the group of Simona should be seen as an example. It's very important to integrate both. I think that there is no field in biomechanics that did not progress thanks to the integration of models and experiments, and this is really what triggers the progress. I would say that also I don't think it's possible to have I don't think it's possible to have a good experiment without a model. I mean, let's think about quantitative modeling. of tissues. You can do tensile test, biaxial tensile test, indentation. You have so many characterization methods. Which one would you choose? This is based on the model that you have in mind, that you will choose which characterization you do. So you cannot separate both. And on the other side, you cannot really have a model that will be translated and then without a validation. So validation is really part of a decision process of pushing a model towards the application. And so this can be, this is fully integrated. So these are two situations where, integration is really important.
Thank you, Stéphane, and thank you also for introducing the next round of questions. But before going to the next round of questions, I would like to open the open discussion with, as a background, this question that is, what are the main barriers preventing better integration between modeling and experimental work today? So if the three panelists could discuss over this question.
Who should start? Because
yeah, thank you.
Okay, but I just start with saying, like what we already said, that it's already like having more porosity between the communities of modelers and experimentalists. That's the barrier is now that it's too separated most of the time, in terms of journals, sometimes in terms of communities, conferences. Like it's good to have better exchange of the communities of modelers and experimentalists, I think.
I agree with this, Stéphane.
Yes. No, sorry.
Please go ahead, Simona.
No, because my at this point I have a question, because what are for us the experimental data? What are the experimenter? Because for my work, I have two kinds of experimental data. The data that we can provide in laboratory that are fully controllable, and a second type of experimental data that comes from the clinical real-world data, where we have no control. So I think that we can also put our attention on what kind of integration we are talking about, because it's quite easier, not easy, but easier to combine experimental laboratory terms results with modeler. But a completely different thing is our models have to replicate the clinical data. So I don't know if it's a good to provide a question instead of an answer.
But I suppose, Simona, there are two things come to my head when the distinction that you have made. One is back in the days when we were doing research in academia, all the people, all the modelers were in a room, and that's where their work area is, and they are isolated from the lab, right? Because you need trainings and permissions and all of that to enter labs, and you generally don't get the clearance. And what I enjoyed is that when I started my PhD and I needed some data for validation, and my professor asked me, "Oh, do you mind doing the experiments?" I said, "Oh, why not?" And so I got the opportunity to do both, and that helped me a lot because I was my experimentalist. I could design and do whatever that I wanted. But often what I saw when somebody was depending on another person's result was that they were not speaking the same language. For example, what model was doing, if the modeler was to explain, I don't know what is happening here. Can you explain the nuance? Can you do this? Can you do that? As you said, whose slave was coming into picture, and there was this whole ego going along, and that wasn't ending easy. And so there were two levels of barriers. One, people were kept separate. Two, people within themselves wanted to know who is having more of a higher ground, right? But now, with all the credibility activities coming in, a modeler must need an experimentalist to validate his model. Without validating, his model is nothing. At the same time, an experimentalist always wants to know, what better can I do with my data, right? What insight can I generate from what experiment that I do? So this idea that is coming out these days with more and more approaches that both are important, I believe is breaking one of the barriers. And I believe the second barrier is that when training, I see that most of us are multidisciplinary. We are not trained to be a modeler, or neither we are trained to be an experimentalist. During our, quest in research, we tend to find bits and pieces and complete the puzzle. So in regular science courses, if we could incorporate bit of each, so that when researchers come to this section of doing modeling or experiment, they would speak the same language. That way, they can integrate each other easier, integrate each other's ideas easier, and be of help or be of support to each activity that has been happening. That I believe that could help in academia, and that could help in industry as well. Uh, I believe industry has a leverage because globally it is understood with this AI wave that technology is important. One must use technology. So there are standard practices put to implement things in place. But that's my opinion. I believe to help, with the future.
I think the point of the clinical data was also well taken, that it's different type of experimental data than the ones that are in the lab. And I believe that the clinical data, are usually not directly connected to what we model. And so if we want to measure like deviation between the predictions of a model and what we can measure in the clinical data, in my field, most of what we have access to are images which have their limitations, and also there is a lack of standards that can be used to share these images among groups. And so if we could have like very large databases of images that are all acquired in the same way, and that we can all process in the same way to better confront to the models, that would also make big progress, and also would also help for labeling some of these data to develop AI models on very large databases. So I think there is sharing data, clinical data is at the moment is still a barrier, I think, to this integration.
I don't know if can be put on the table also sorry for this term, but economical aspect, because in general, the experimental tests in laboratory are more expensive with respect to a computational environment. So maybe also for this reason, that is not so easy to work to integrate for several districts, for several aspects, for several something. The same approach under the umbrella of modeler and experimenter. So also this because not so easy to replicate what a computational model can do in terms of experiments, but it's true also the vice versa. So for my experience, there is sometimes a gap between what we would like to analyze with experiment and what we can realize with computation. But maybe it's a problem now and will be not a problem tomorrow.
Thank you for this very interesting discussion. I will now give the floor again to Luca to introduce the next round of questions.
Yes, thanks, Elena. So we're gonna move towards the trust validation and scientific challenges in the integration of these two approaches. And let's start with a question for Shiny. When can researchers trust a computational model and when should they remain cautious? I think you already mentioned credibility. I think you can go more in detail in this.
Definitely, definitely. I think the one-word answer is credibility assessment. It can be broken down into verification, validation, uncertainty management, and you know there are multiple terms that come along with it. But what does it mean when it comes to the bottom of it? I would say, so when I started modeling very simple models, my supervisor joked to me. I was telling my supervisor, oh, I'm not sure if my model is doing what it is wanted. It is giving me some lies as answers. And my supervisor goes, all models are statistical lies unless and until they are used for the context of use. So basically, we are dealing with a bunch of lies, but they are true only to the given condition that they are designed for, right? So that I always follow that when it comes to trusting models, because then you would see what context is the model validated for, what context is the credibility assessment activities carried out. And if you have a good credible model with validation done in a good data set and all of those beautiful shenanigans that come along to trust the model. And also another factor comes is impact with high risk, or is it a high impact with low risk, or the four different setup there. So if it's something that is low risk and if it's okay to assume, I would use the model easily without. And if it's a high risk where patients are involved and their life is at stake, I have to be really cautious, right, before I apply it. So that is another aspect that would come before I trust the model. And often the case is that we do not get a perfect model. We do have to do tweakings, we have to do fitting, we have to use the best data that we can get. And in these cases, I think we have to do everything to get the context of use really well defined and move cautiously on the application, how I will be using the model. And yeah, that is what I would say with respect to using a computational model.
Thank you, Shiny. So you're saying that the context of use should be a primary thing to define of your model if you want to gain some trust in it.
Yeah, definitely, because only then you can validate it very well. Otherwise, you could validate it, but it wouldn't mean anything much to have the trust factor in it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let's go further with a question for Simona. And what are the good practices for validating computational models using either experimental or clinical data? I think these two kinds of data can be used for different aspects of models' credibility. Well, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Luca. And I would like to follow up on what we said earlier, because this is a complex question. As you mentioned, and how we have talked about before, in my view, there are two types of experimental data. Experiments from laboratory and experimental that are the real world data from our clinical environment. I don't know. Sorry, for sure I have no the right answer, but I can propose my perspective derived from my experience. I think it could be useful to reformulate the concept on how we can validate our computational model with experimental data and with clinical data. What I mean is that I don't know if right now we have the correct, the straight connection between models and the clinical data. For this way, we use the experimental setup as a link. Just to put on the table something real. We try to create an experimental environment starting with clinical data and able to cope in the better way our clinical data, having in mind the question of interest and the context of usage. These are the keywords of this link. When we are able to recreate this environment specifically focused on question and context with an experimental setup where we have the full control in terms of input, output, and boundaries, whatever you want, you can consider your boundaries, then we can try to close the gap between model and experimental setup. I don't know if I explain it in a clear way, but I think that there is a pathway in terms of validation of our model, and this assesses also the credibility of our model. But the validation of our model with clinical data is very difficult due to the uncertainties, due to the variability, due to a lot of negative aspect. Negative, but that aspect that however are real present in the real world data. So we try to create a fully controllable experimental environment that could be one-to-one close to the numerical model, so that we are able to close the gap between experimental setup, laboratory setup, and computational model, so that the bridge is reestablished with the clinical data. I don't know if I explained my thoughts.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear. Maybe a quick follow-up question. How do you apply and deploy the norms like the VV-UQ40 or other norms for the validation and verification of these models in your daily life?
Exactly for that. Just to put an example, if we want to understand if our computational model are able to predict the pressure drop in coarctation, just to put an example, we try to replicate an experimental setup with able to work with the same geometry, but also boundary condition at inlet and outlet, so that we are one by one, numerical and experimental, for the same questions, question and context. So this is what we try to do every day.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Simona. Without further, we can go to the last question of this round for Stéphane. What should researcher do when computational models and experimental results are not agreeing?
Well, so I think maybe the answer would be different if we keep the word researcher or if we think more about engineers, because I tend to think like that the best models or the best experiments are the ones that do not work because they trigger the curiosity of researchers, and then this is where you learn and when you will discover something. So I think in terms of more academic research, a disagreement between experimental results and computational models should be seen as something positive. That this is, I mean, where there is a discovery to be found and new things to be understood. And so then doesn't mean that it's easy, but at least, okay, there is a lack of understanding, and this is what research is meant for. This is more like, if it's more like on the engineering side, and if the model, computational model needs to be used in the, I mean, with some clinical decision making, then of course this is not good. But I've seen a number of examples where the validation process needs to be designed carefully, and this is also what is behind the NV40, right? Because I mean, the credibility of your model depends also on the impact that it will have on the decision making. And we've seen models that, for instance, would not predict accurately the position of a stent when it is deployed in terms of like less than a millimeter precision position, which I think is very difficult anyway, due to all the uncertainty you have in terms of material properties and conditions in the body. But at the same time, it can be super precise in terms of detecting which patient is going to have a complication, which patient is not going to have a complication. And so it, I mean that a computational model disagreement should not be interpreted as a failure if I mean it's not directly related to the decision, clinical decision. Okay, so you may have a disagreement that is more like for the engineer, but I mean, can we still use these predictions and I mean have I mean some help, I mean some assistance, provide like a marker of risk for the clinician. I think that's the question that needs to be asked before analyzing a disagreement as a failure.
Thanks, Stéphane, for the interesting reply on this. Never thought about a positive thing of a disagreement between the model and the data. Let's go further with our open discussion on this topic, and we can use this question as a playground. So what skills should young researchers develop to work effectively across both domains?
If I was asked the question that Stéphane was asked, I would have said, close your laptop and go home. But he was graceful enough to give a very good answer. And in those lines, I believe the foremost skill that you need is patience, because it's going to take a lot of patience to be able to ensure what it takes for the model and the experiment to come along in symphony, I would say. But that is not a technical skill, but a generic skill that I would say. But most of it, I believe, an open mindset. You are not predetermined with where you're going. You should always be open for possibilities, because if you don't tweak your model, you do not have a good model. That is the process of it. And I think then there are plenty technical skills, we could say, right? Let's say programming, or the mathematical integration of parameterization, and all of those. I think all the students are aware of it. But soft skills are what makes it more, let's say, enjoyable in the process of uh, doing this modeling aspect, I would say.
Yes, let me add one keywords that I have in mind is the curiosity. So do not stop. Do not think that you have found the correct answer, because the integration of the two words put on the table new questions day by day. And in terms of soft skill, okay, technical skill are not so easy to integrate, to combine the modeler and experiments. But however, in my experience, the central point is the need to bring to the table every aspect and every piece of knowledge that each of us has acquired during our career. So what we have learned yesterday is fundamental to understand the question that we will find tomorrow. So do not stop with the question, and obviously study a lot.
I think technical wise, you are not skilled. You just don't have the right AI prompt, if I can say it in the current world, because you get it all everywhere. But yeah, I definitely agree with Simona. Without curiosity, there is no tomorrow in modeling, I would say.
Maybe what I wanted to add is I think it goes also in the same direction, like with patience that was mentioned by Shiny, but I would maybe say more like determination than patience. And what I mean by that is I remember there was a very inspiring talk 2 years ago by Frank Byans. He received the Whiskas Award at the ESB, and then he explained, and I mean, all his career he wanted to develop bioengineered heart valves for patients and for babies, and then well, he said like to progress, we try to address the problem from all the angles possible, from all the perspectives possible, and so they did a lot of computer modeling. And then you would think, I mean, why doing computer modeling on a problem that is really practical? I mean, they had to manufacture something that could be implanted, and then but they progressed, and so because they were driven by that goal, that they wanted to develop these heart valves that I mean needed they needed to understand many things. And so if you're driven by determination on a very important clinical problem, I think that you will naturally integrate models and experiments, because both will be important to reach your goal. So that's but you need not to give up. I mean, when you face the difficulties, and try try modeling if experiments they fail, try experiments if models they fail, and this will lead to progress.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I think we all agreed that curiosity and application-driven research is needed for this integration of these two aspects. And I like the mechanical term that Stéphane used, a porous communication should be present in our community to advance also the field with these two approaches. Yeah, I will leave the word to Ellen again for the Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you all for the very interesting discussion. And since it was a very big topic, I guess that the audience could have any question, and if any of you is in this situation, can type the question in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we will activate your microphone. And in the meantime, I would like to remind you to register for our conference that will take place in September in Milan. So you are in time to register for the early registration. And I would like to sponsor our next webinar that will be in on the 29th of June. And the title of the next webinar will be Challenges and Opportunities for In Silico Spine Biomechanics in Clinical and Surgical Practice. So you will receive the registration details later, and you can see the registration details also in our social networks. So going back to our Q&A session, I have some questions that I raised in the registration process. So I can start from that questions, and then if any of the audience has other to add, I will add them. So the first one, I think it's for Shiny, but if the other panelists would like to add something, you're free to add. And it is how might quantum computing complement AI in moving from predictive models to rational chemical simulation?
I think that is a million-dollar question that all the big pharmas are asking at this point, because the investors have gone, we must use AI. And when it trickles down to the modelers, the ability for automatic predictions to be, let's say, credible enough is also a question. So I would say quantum computing will do a good job in terms of dealing with the complicated simulations that we envision and often do not pursue because of the amount of tasks that are enlisted in it. But at the same time, I believe it'll boost the amount of modeling and implementation that we are using in the current scenario. Said that, I have to say that I'm very biased with respect to pharmaceutical product development because I am in this niche. But I believe globally we are going to use this as an accessory to enable ourselves to be more accurate in our predictions and more faster in our computations.
Thank you, Shiny. I will move on to the next question. I think a lot of the answer is this question has the answer during the webinar, but if you would like to add something, you're free to add. And the question is, how do you measure interpretability and trust in models?
I can add another word that we have not stressed sufficiently, maybe. And these are the uncertainties, the analysis of the uncertainties. And this can also increase the credibility of our model, because I remember when I was very young during my master thesis, when I tried to explore this stochastic approach to not provide a single value as a result of our computational analysis, but my thesis was on master thesis was on modeling, but to provide a range of value, and in particular to provide to assess the effect of some variable that are not measurable, mentioning the Galileo again. But sometimes we have no answer from the experiment of clinical data, so we have to put a guess in our models. But it's fundamental to also to have the power of these quantities, even if we didn't know the exact value. And this could be provided, in my experience, with a stochastic approach. So, but I repeat, this is basically my experience. It's difficult to trust a physician with them. Oh, take a look at this pressure because it's critical. Is not this the way to trust the physician? For my experience, obviously, but should be okay. Look at this value because statistically this value could be critical. So in other terms is the language, to define a common language between us and the clinicians.
Thank you very much. I will move on to the next question, which is related to the validation. And the question is, does the in silico validation of bioproducts under MDR and ASME verification and validation 40 has real application in the job market?
My answer is yes. At least in my field of work, that is how you ensure that you do take a fairly credible model to the regulators, and also for internal decisions to understand what amount of, let's say, probabilistic trust that you can have in the model in terms of its application. But I believe it is a purely question of point of view and extension of applicability. So I believe, as Simona said, when you have to convince the clinician, no matter of no amount of fancy words saying, oh, we've validated this, validated that would work unless and until we speak their language in terms of giving them the probability, what it would mean for patients, right? And unfortunately, that is a language of heart, I would say. You have to speak to them in terms of not, modeling language. But at the same time, if you are talking modeling to a fellow modeler or fellow regulator, you do need the strict, armor of terminologies and values coming in.
Thank you, Shiny. We have a question from the public. How do artificial intelligence accelerated frameworks advance conventional mechanics method-based computational simulation?
Maybe I can start to provide an answer. I think that this is still a lot of things are ongoing research. in terms of like replacing traditional finite element method by neural networks or using artificial intelligence to do model order reduction that then a number of companies like HeartFlow, for instance, is very well known, has implemented directly. So instead of running like a CFD analysis, would use all the database of previous patients to learn what the response would be for another one. So this is really taking up fast, and the more data, the more patients you have, and the more you can rely on these technologies. So I think it's taking up very fast.
Yeah, and related to in vivo tissue mechanics, I think it's a question for Stéphane again. What's the future of patient simulation, inverse modeling or virtual population? It is a related question, I think.
So the question is in terms of tissue mechanics?
Yeah, the future is inverse modeling or virtual populations.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I understand everything, but I think related to having access to, patient-specific material properties, maybe to run these simulations, I think there will always be a lot of uncertainty on that. And what Simona said, what we call also Bayesian analysis, where you would not provide a deterministic answer and prediction, but more like something probabilistic, is probably an answer. So I don't know if this is what the person who asked the question was calling like the virtual population, like maybe having like a Monte Carlo analysis. And but I think that even if you do inverse analysis, first in many applications, if you don't want to break the clinical workflow, you will not be able to include another assessment of material properties of the tissue of a patient. So the access to these material properties will be difficult. And second, even if you have access, this will be with a range of uncertainty. So in the end, this is usually in these models a large source of uncertainty that justifies to have a Bayesian analysis and not having a deterministic model.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Elena, sorry, can I add
yeah, sure.
one aspect? Because I fully agree with Stéphane, but and I don't know if I understand well the question, but I would like to put again the attention on the question of interest, because if inverse analysis should be considered in terms of precision medicine, so simulation for that specific patient, this is, in this case, we are under the branch of precision medicine. Otherwise, a patient population, if our question is on another view. So I don't think there is a correct answer. Depends by the questions. So both could be a correct approach. Depends by the
Simona,
question.
if I may, the question is, it's hard to get in vivo tissue mechanics. So the context is that when you can't get in vivo tissue mechanic data, what is the future for patient simulation?
Why we
Would
cannot
you do inverse or virtual population?
Yes. So what we can also to try to figure out that we, thanks to Stéphane in particular, able to cope with the mechanical properties of the patient in vivo. Why not in the future?
Yeah, I can read one last question from the chat. Matteo, if you want to have it directly yourself, you can raise your hand. I will read the second one in the meantime. So Matteo is saying, to my knowledge, there is no standardization or established guidelines in terms of tolerances that can be accepted while performing uncertainty quantification.
So the question is, what is the percentage of error that we can...
Exactly.
I think tolerance is up to the freedom of decision of the modeler on what does the modeler think is acceptable or not. Often overridden by the clinicians in the case where clinicians are incorporated into the modeling activity. But
I don't know, but we have to decide the specific context, because for example, if we have to consider the diameters of an aneurysm, if we have 10 clinicians, 10 radiologists, we obtain 10 different measures. So the error is intrinsic of the medicine, not in terms of our work, but in terms of the medicine itself. So there is not, for my experience, a single range, range of error. Depends by the context, the question, and the fact of these uncertainties and how these uncertainties affect in terms of the results.
I guess also the tolerance. I think if you have like a clinical decision that is super critical, that needs to be taken on one aspect only, which is, I think, very rare. And this aspect would come from the prediction of the model. Like, of course, the tolerance would be zero, okay, I guess. But most of the time, I think that a clinician will gather a number of information to take a decision. And I think already a lot of decisions are already taken without using digital twins. And if you add the help of a digital twin, you will include other information with a range of uncertainty that you can characterize. That's the most important. You know how much uncertain is it, and then this will be taken into account by the clinician with the other information that the clinician has. So I think there is not like a single answer to the question, but the take-home message is always like we need to know the uncertainty, okay, and then based on that, there will be a different use depending on this uncertainty. But there is not like, okay, the uncertainty is too large, and so this should be this is garbage. No, this will be used differently depending on the uncertainty, I guess.
Thanks a lot to all the nice answers that we got from our guests. I don't see new questions in the chat. We can maybe wait a few seconds still. In the meantime, I remind you again about our next webinar next month. And thank you all for attending this webinar.
Thank you, Stéphane and Simona, for agreeing to be part of this on behalf of student committee, and Elena and Luca for moderating this session. A lot of hard work. And of course, Davide for helping us with all the setup.